Hi. Just a couple nights ago was the first presidential debate of 2024, and maybe the last one ever. I mean, I guess we'll find out in September when the next one supposedly is. I hate to sound like an asshole, but this is exactly how I expected it to play out. It didn't look very good for anyone. Joe Biden is old. He's so old. He walked out looking old. But then at the same time, Donald Trump waddles out too. Like, they both look like shit and act very old. They didn't shake hands, they barely looked at each other, they didn't kiss. None of what the American people wanted, really. I mean, speaking of, there was no crowd this time, which led to both candidates trailing off of their points, losing their trains of thought, and just being old in general.
He inherited almost no inflation, and it stayed that way for 14 months. And then it blew up under his leadership because they spent money like a bunch of people that didn't know what they were doing, and they don't know what they were doing. It was the worst, probably the worst administration in history. There's never been.
At first, I thought not having a crowd was a good thing, because usually the crowd will end up laughing, cheering, applauding at times that are inopportune for one candidate or the other. But not having a candidate this time really sucked the energy out of the room bad. And also, I think, kind of confused and scared Joe Biden. He see ghosts in the rafters. But they also kept the audience out to avoid protesters, which somehow keep happening, I guess, due to Joe Biden's consistent and unwavering support for genocide. Maybe you should stop doing that instead of hiding from people. I mean, this is Biden's first live televised event in a while, and you can tell. Throughout the entire debate, Biden's age is unavoidable. He lost track of what he was saying 2 or 3 different times. Completely, just trails off.
We have 1,000 trillionaires in America. I mean, billionaires in America. And what's happening? They're in a situation where they, in fact, pay 8.2% in taxes. If they just paid 24%, 25%, either one of those numbers, they'd raise $500 million, billion dollars, I should say, in a 10-year period. We'd be able to wipe out his debt. We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
And with no crowd, no interruptions from Trump, he was allowed to make the most obvious fool of himself possible. Literally what everyone expected, but still somehow worse. The Democratic Party, ladies and gentlemen. Joe Biden immediately sounded sick and weak.
We brought down the price of prescription drugs, which is a major issue for many people, to $15 for a insulin shot as opposed to $400.
But for some reason sounded fine afterward.
That's why I call him Donald Herbert Hoover Trump.
I guess he was just scared. I don't know. But on the other hand, Trump had ongoing chances to break the backboard dunking on Biden and failed over and over again. His closing remarks, and he was talking about some specific veteran insurance policy.
You know, what we did for the military was incredible choice for our soldiers, where our soldiers, instead of waiting for 3 months to see a doctor, can go out and get themselves fixed up and readied up and take care of themselves, and they're living.
Before petering out into a half-hearted conclusion, missing any of the charisma and impact that someone like Trump needs to not sound like an unhinged whiner, which Biden tried to point out, but only made himself look sleepier.
But you continue to provoke this lie about somehow there's all this misrepresentation, all this stealing. There is no evidence of that at all. And I tell you what, I doubt whether you'll accept it because you're such a whiner. The idea, if you lose again, you accepting anything?
He's so tired. The actual policies debated on stage, well, there weren't really any of them. I think it's important to note that this wasn't like an officially commissioned debate from the Presidential Debate Commission or whatever. The questions themselves were weak, incomplete, and just never really followed up on.
As president, you swore an oath to, quote, preserve, protect, and defend, unquote, the Constitution. What do you say to voters who believe that you violated that oath through your actions and inaction on January 6th and worry that you'll do it again?
Well, I don't think too many believe that. And let me tell you about January 6th. On January 6th, we were respected all over the world. And then he comes in and we're now laughed at. We're like a bunch of stupid people.
What happened to the United States' reputation under this man's leadership is horrible, including weaponization, which I'm sure at some point you'll be talking about, where he goes after his political opponent because he can't beat him fair and square.
You have 80 seconds left. My question was, what do you say to those voters who believe that you violated your constitutional oath through your actions and inaction on January 6, 2021, and worry that you'll do it again?
Well, I didn't say that to anybody.
I said peacefully and patriotically. And Nancy Pelosi, who just watched the news 2 days ago, one take your daughter who's a documented filmmaker. They said, she's saying, oh, no, it's my responsibility. I was responsible for this. Because over 10,000 soldiers were national guard. She turned down the mayor. You might have been there. You might have turned down the mayor of DC. They turned down. I overturned that because I could see. I had virtually nothing to do with the escalating I could see what was happening. Everybody saying that either. January 6th, and I said, you know what? That's a lot of people coming. You can feel it. You can feel it. And I said, yeah, have some national guard or whatever. And I opened the door. And she now admits that she turned it down. And it was the same day she was, I don't know, she kept having a liar. She said, I take full responsibility for January 6th.
President Biden?
Look, he encouraged those folks to go up on Capitol Hill.
And at one point, Trump was asked 3 different times the same exact question about affordable childcare in America, which is one of the most important factors to voters right now. But he kept talking about immigration instead.
The average cost of childcare in this country has risen to more than $11,000 a year per child. For many families, the cost of childcare for 2 children is more than their rent. In your second term, what would you do to make childcare more affordable?
He doesn't fire people. He never fired people. I've never seen him fire anybody. I did fire a lot. I fired Comey because he was no good. I fired a lot of the top people. I inherited these people. I didn't put him there. I didn't put Comey there. He was no good. I fired him. This guy hasn't fired anybody. He never fires. He should have fired every military man that was involved with that the Afghanistan horror show. He didn't fire. Did you fire anybody? Did you fire anybody that's on the border? Did anybody get fired for allowing 18 million people, many from prisons? Did you fire anybody that allowed our country to be destroyed? Joe, our country is being destroyed as you and I sit up here and waste a lot of time on this debate. He's the worst president in the history of our country. He's destroyed our country. He is the worst in history by far.
Thank you, President Trump. President Biden?
We are the most admired country in the world. We're the United States of America.
President Trump, the question was about what would you do to make childcare more affordable, if you want to take your minute.
Just so you understand, we have polling, we have other things that they rate him the worst. And they rate me one of the best, okay? The worst president in history by far, and everybody knows it.
Yeah, cool. Which one of these guys is better at golf, I wonder?
I'm in very good health. I just won 2 club championships, not even senior. To do that, you have to be quite smart, and you have to be able to hit the ball a long way. And I do it. He doesn't do it. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. He challenged me to a golf match. He can't hit a ball 50 yards.
Look, I'd be happy to have a driving contest with him. I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6. But by the way, I told you before, I'm happy to play golf if you carry your own bag. Think you can do it?
That's the biggest lie. He's a 6 handicap of all.
I was an 8 handicap.
Yeah.
8. But I have, you know how many?
I've seen you swing. I know you swing.
Oh, Trump also shit himself, like straight up. He definitely shit himself.
It's too much money. It's tremendous.
Donald Trump still managed to defeat Joe Biden in the marketplace of ideas with a diaper full of doo-doo. The Democratic Party, ladies and gentlemen. One singular question was asked directly about Gaza, which is truly disgraceful on the part of the moderators.
So what additional leverage will you use to get Hamas and Israel to end the war? You have 2 minutes.
The first stage is trade the hostages for a ceasefire. Second phase is a ceasefire with additional conditions. The third phase is the end of the war. We're providing Israel with all the weapons they need and when they need them. Hamas cannot be allowed to be continued. It should be eliminated. But you've got to be careful for using certain weapons among population centers.
Just going back to Ukraine for 1 second.
It's a way to cover up the unity that both parties have as far as the apartheid state of Israel goes. And it would have helped Joe Biden to point out that Donald Trump's Abraham Accords are a huge factor in starting the current conflict. But who knows where Joe even is right now. Hello, Joe, Mr. President.
He's become like a Palestinian, but they don't like him because he's a very bad Palestinian. He's a weak one.
Do you guys think Joe Biden at one point might have thought this was a dream? Just for a second. But he fully believed it. The economy, immigration, and abortion are key material issues for this election. Joe Biden fumbled talking points for all of these things. Abortion should be the easiest thing to nail Trump on. But Joe Biden lost Roe under his watch and now keeps yapping about restoring it or maybe codifying the right to choose. But he won't say how or when. He could do it now, or at least announce his plan to do it. He's the president. What do you mean you'll do it in the next term? Joe Biden completely dropped the ball on easy questions like those related to abortion. It should be such an easy win for him. Just say words. I mean, one of the first things Joe Biden mentions is capping rent prices.
We're going to make sure we build 2 million new units. We're going to make sure we cap rents so corporate greed can't take over.
Where? How? I looked it up, and earlier this year, the Biden administration imposed a rent increase cap to no more than 10% per year applied to specific rent-controlled units. So it's not a price cap on rent, it's a cap on how much rent can be increased in 1 year, which is a perfect example of Biden-style policy, something that sounds perfectly good and progressive, but is only applied to a minuscule fraction of the population, does not go far enough, and does nothing to actually solve the underlying and systemic problem it's trying to combat the symptoms of, in this case, affordable housing. On the economy, Joe Biden did a lot of blaming Donald Trump for the bad economy he inherited in 2020.
We got to take a look at what I was left when I became president, what Mr. Trump left me. We had an economy that was in free fall. The pandemic was so badly handled. Many people were dying. All he said was, it's not that serious. Just inject a little bleach into your arm. You'll be all right.
Which would normally be kind of a weaker point if not for Trump acting like his 2020 economy was actually awesome and great, which is not true. And one of the biggest reasons he's not president right now. I don't know if he forgot. People don't associate the year 2020 with like an incredible economy.
By the time we finished, so we did a great job. We got a lot of credit for the economy, a lot of credit for the military, and no wars and so many other things. Everything was rocking good.
And him saying that while the economy is not doing well right now is probably not going to make voters feel very good. But I don't know if anyone's mind was changed by this. Donald Trump did shit himself shortly after this moment.
It's tremendous.
What was really weird to me was I felt like a lot of the talking points boiled down to basically identical conversations that these two had in their debates in 2020, except Joe Biden is rotting even more somehow. There was no question on Trump's border wall, and neither of them even mentioned it. I mean, the reason is they've both been building it. I guess it's just a bipartisan issue now. Wow, thanks, Joe Biden. You're really healing the country with unity. Trump consistently hammered on immigration, really framing it as the most pressing issue in America, when it is a right-wing fabrication that Democrats have consistently been trying to compromise on when the right doesn't want solutions. It's just racism. And Joe Biden and the Democratic Party keep playing into it every day of their campaign. Trump got away over and over with flailing and ranting and raving on his normal anti-immigration language and hollow economic talking points. He literally said America is a rat's nest because of illegal immigration.
We are living right now in a rat's nest. They're killing our people in New York, in California, in every state in the union because we don't have borders anymore. Every state is now a border.
Anything from the moderators? Joe?
Every single thing he said is a lie. Every single one. For example, veterans are a hell of a lot better off since I passed the PACT Act. I went to the World War II cemetery, World War I cemetery he refused to go to. He was standing with his 4-star general, and he told me, he said, I don't want to go in there because they're a bunch of losers and suckers. My son was not a loser, was not a sucker. You're a sucker. You're a loser.
Joe Biden's closing remarks were disastrous.
What I did, when, for example, he wants to get rid of the ability of Medicare us to be able to negotiate drug prices with the big pharma companies. Well, guess what? We got it down to $35 for insulin instead of $400. No more than $2,000 for every senior, no matter how much prescription they need.
His campaign won the coin flip before the debate that determines where he stands and who gets the last word. Joe Biden chose to stand on the right side of the stage in exchange for the last word, which meant his closing statement had to be airtight for Trump not to take full advantage of his blunders and general senility. But he couldn't even do it. He couldn't even stumble past the finish line.
The whole country is exploding because of you, because they don't respect you, and they have to respect their president, and they don't respect you throughout the world. All of the things that we've done, nobody's never seen anything like, even from a medical standpoint, right to try, where we can try space-age materials instead of going to Asia or going to Europe and trying to get when you're terminally ill. Now you can go and you can get something. You sign a document. They've been trying to get it for 42 years. But you know what we did for the military was incredible. Choice for our soldiers, where our soldiers, instead of waiting for 3 months to see a doctor, can go out and get themselves fixed up and readied up and take care of themselves, and they're living. And that's why I had the highest approval rating in the history of the VA. So all of these things, we're in a failing nation.
Trump couldn't stick his landing. The jabs that he did hit sideways. And the whole debate ends with this uncanny silence enveloping everything.
Thank you, former President Trump, President Biden. Stay with us because we have full analysis of this debate. Anderson Cooper and Aaron Burnett starts now on CNN.
By the time the anchors cut back in, it felt like I had just watched a 9/11 style tragedy. Like people were in shock. When it comes to who won or lost, I feel very similar to how I did in 2020, which is, you know, everyone lost. But more so now than before, for sure. I don't know if there's any winning in this situation. Liberals barely even tried to spin any of this and dove straight into how badly Joe Biden did. Not that it was exactly easy to avoid.
There's a real concern here tonight that there's been some real damage done that cannot be undone.
But the focus has been, since before any of the debate coverage, whether or not Joe Biden will survive being on live TV. Everyone who knows anything about Trump knows what he's gonna say. He's very predictable when you're talking about how he does his public speaking. But Joe Biden is getting worse every day, and people really got a chance to see it. Oh, I forgot to mention, this had as a joke, by the way. Any video is someone's first video, potentially. I'm not a libertarian freak. I just thought it was funny, and it looks good. Because Biden did so poorly, Trump supporters are saying Trump won, which they always do anyway, for everything. But to be honest, for someone who has listened pretty intently to Trump for about a decade, not because I like him. Listen, the hat is a joke. Trump is not doing so hot either. Maybe it was performance anxiety, but Trump is having more and more senior moments, not as severe as Biden's, but just as difficult to ignore when you start to notice. But you know, Joe Biden was literally staring at ghosts and spirits and specters in the audience. Immediately after the debate, liberals turned hard on Biden. CNN's coverage attacked him right out the gate, and instantly op-eds flooded the press about Joe Biden's horrible performance, even suggesting that he should step aside for another nominee. As outlets came out to fact-check Trump afterward, it became more and more obvious that Joe Biden is unable to even confront when Trump is lying. For as much as Trump lied during the debate, which was basically everything he said, Biden couldn't catch like 90% of them. He's literally too old to stop him from lying. The moderators didn't do anything. They should have at least tried to do some fact checking. But it's also Joe Biden's responsibility to respond to what Trump is saying. That's what he's there to do. Kamala Harris went on CNN shortly after the debate to try to do damage control, but Anderson Cooper suddenly remembered how to be contentious for the first time, I think, in his life, and actually asks relevant questions and presses Kamala to the point where she just can't even answer.
One said it was a disaster. Another called it a train wreck. Those are Democrats especially worried that Biden did not punch back on Trump's lies.
Listen, people can debate on style points, but ultimately this election and who is the president of the United States has to be about substance. And just 3 years ago, we commemorated the 2-year anniversary of Dobbs, wherein women across our country have been denied emergency health care,
All that may be true. All that may be true. But the president of the United States was not able to make that case to Donald Trump on the stage tonight. I mean, you debated against Vice President Biden 4 years ago. He was a very different person on the stage 4 years ago when you debated him. That's certainly true, is it not?
Anderson, the point has to be performance in terms of what a president does. A president who incites an insurrection against the Capitol. No, but I got the point that you're making about a 1.5 hour debate tonight. I'm talking about 3.5 years of performance in work that has been historic.
But whether it be the man who we saw on the stage tonight, is that the person you see in meetings every day?
Shrimp and grits.
Madam Vice President, Hamas has accepted a ceasefire deal. Hamas has accepted a ceasefire deal. Your reaction?
You wanted to know? Shrimp and grits. After the debate, the Democratic Party was in panic crisis control mode and still may be currently deciding whether or not to replace Joe Biden. I personally think internally the DNC just keeps asking Joe Biden if he's senile and believing him. Nah, Jack, I'm all good. Tell Gorbachev he can pay for this round. I'm hungry. Stop believing him. He's losing his mind. But the biggest question is, who can replace him in time for November? I think a lot of naysayers will want to stall for time, which is what liberals love to do, by saying there isn't enough time to pick a nominee before the election, which I think is bullshit. Biden's a bad candidate. People do not want him. And I think there's a responsibility on Biden's part to acknowledge the facts of his campaign. If Biden does not want to do what's necessary to win voters over until his next term for some reason, that's on him. And if he just wants to pull a Ruth Bader Ginsburg and refuse to step down, we know how that story ends. If he even beats Trump, which I don't think he will. Who can replace him? Not Kamala. That's the only thing I know for sure. Bernie could do it, and honestly, he'd have a pretty good chance at beating Trump. But will it happen? No. Liberals in power prefer Trump as president to Bernie. We learned this in 2016. Even if Trump is the existential threat to democracy they say he is, Bernie Sanders is a semi-existential threat to capitalism, or at least the American corporate world, which America holds much more sacred than any sort of democracy, or whatever conservatives say. Constitutional republic, brother. The latest is that Joe Biden is not stepping aside, and according to him, he's totally fine, actually.
Because I intend to win this state in November. Are you going to see that happen? I don't debate as well as I used to. But I know what I do know. I know how to tell the truth. I know right from wrong. And I know how to do this job.
Joe Biden has investigated his own senility and found no senility. He's good. There are clearly a lot of cogs in the Democratic Party machine in the form of mainstream media, even donors, that are very concerned about Joe Biden's performance and are urging something to happen. Maybe some kind of brain transplant, get him a new head like John Fetterman. Anything can happen in this crazy world. But yeah, that was the debate. It was an actual disaster. It was awesome. I actually streamed it live on Twitch, and you could have watched it live with me, but you missed it. But hey, I stream multiple times a week and every Sunday, so if you want to catch me there, twitch.tv/PethanOnline. I'm live, probably right now, actually. This was another quick video I wanted to make in between a couple of other ones, just because I wanted to get the quick politics coverage out before I stopped really caring. But thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, you can press subscribe to vote for me to be the next president. Thanks so much to my patrons on Patreon. I have bonus content on there if you would like to check it out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video. Bye.